Welcome back to the ninth installment of Welcome back to the ninth installment of the Web Novel Roundup. And today I've been inspired to do something a little different. Previously, I would just pick out 3 stories based on a theme or at random and talk about them. But doing filming my most recent video for the Worm series, I decided I really like that format, and we're going to do that. I'm calling this one the Royal Road web novel shotgun approach. Let's be honest here. I've got an infinitely expanding number of web novels to read, and I'm going to try and get caught up on some of those today. More infinitely expanding than the universe, although that's probably more due to our inevitable heat death. I'm just going to do a live reading, edit it down, and we'll see what we like. At any point, if I decide that I don't like it, I'm going to stop right there. Press the button. If I really like it, I'll stop and put it on another list, and we can do another episode on those really good ones. And if it's medium, we'll read a little bit and give up after a while. Our very first story we're going to read today is Dots, which I'm excited about. Put out the thing there. As far as covers go, I like it. It's simple. It's clean. And the the person who posts this, I've seen him around the forums a lot. He has a very overproduced sort of way of posting with his signature, and there's little butterflies, so I'm assuming it's going to be high effort. Sci-fi adventure with a hint of romance. Mankind has invented a machine that can locate a genius hidden among the populace. With 2 simple tests, not only can a person find out if they're a genius, capitalized, so I'm getting Divergent YA vibes there.
The test didn't work on you. They call it Divergent.
But they will also be told what they're a genius at. Once again, this is a live reading. I didn't know that second half of the sentence before I commented on the first half. Unless they find out they're a dot. The only thing a dot knows is that the world hates them. Unless you're a dot named Hank. The world discovers quickly that it needs Hank very much, but he had better hurry. Bad guys have a use for what they know dots can do, and they will stop at nothing to achieve their goal. Read Dots, a series of 7 light novels, and see Hank use his genius to somehow save the world. I like the intro, especially the first paragraph. It gets confused in the second half, and I feel like it already breaks its own rule. Dots are not geniuses, but dots apparently, despite being normal people, have powers. Come see the dot named Hank use his genius, even though geniuses and... Okay, let's just get into it. I'm already worried. Chapter 1, The Book of Liberality. Okay, it starts with a poem from Victor Hugo, which... I love Les Miserables. In the Age of Enlightenment. Yeah, I'm skipping past the prologue. Should I do the prologue? Okay. The prologue's in there. We're starting with the prologue. Nothing can be won here. I was about to just start summarizing here because I don't want to read it one-to-one. But let's read this next sentence. Rio scarcely knew she thought these words, having said them to herself so often. Scarcely knew she thought these words because she said them a lot. We start off a little vague and unwieldy in our writing here, but it sets the scene pretty good. She's on a trawler. Our main character appears, or our prologue character, Rio, is on a trawler across the Pacific, and there's something after her. She pondered facing down her demon, but after abandoning her soporando in Sendai and saying goodbye to her staff of Mizu Shozai girls, after abandoning her soporandu in Sendai, which is, I'm assuming that's a city, saying goodbye to her staff of Mizu Shobai girls, water something girls. She had first, there's this weird tonal shift here. Hey, Editing Steven here. So here's the thing. I read that in a completely different way. Hey, Editing Steven here. So I read that in a very different way. I was thinking staff like a magical rod. So I thought after this big dark opening, there was like Sailor Moon transformation Hey, editing Steven here. So I feel a little bad about this because I looked it up when I was editing. When it said staff of the Mizu Shobai, I was thinking like Sailor Moon, magical, mystical girl transformation. That's not at all what it was saying. My bad. So I'm going to go ahead and summarize what happens next. I push the button and we go on to the next thing, but I feel a little bad about that because I misunderstood. So we're going to come back to Dot someday, and I'm going to give you a good review, a fair shake, because I didn't do that this time. I gave up after a paragraph. With all that said, I don't speak Japanese, so that's kind of also on you. Like, why would you think I know that? Next story. I am giving up on paragraph 2. It took me longer to read the description. Next story. One of my favorite covers, A World of Monsters by Encore93. I don't think I said the name. The last one was by R.D. Berger. From a sundered universe, a sorceress is made to be reborn, but a human, the sorceress is no more. A sorceress is made to be reborn, but a human, the sorceress... Okay. See where today's theme is going. Born an insect, a vermin with a mere 90 days of life, the sorceress seeks reasons to live. Oh, okay. But a human, the sorceress is no more. She is no longer a human. She's been... Okay. That was a very awkward way of phrasing that. Suffering the curse of unending starvation, the sorceress must ceaselessly eat or die. Meanwhile, Kieran leaves his home to defy mediocrity. Don't know who that is. Named after the hope he represents, he seeks a class so austere, that hundreds fail in their search. Yet before this class, even the gods bow their heads in respect. P.S. This is not a numbers-clenching lit RPG. And yet you say that, and yet one of your paragraphs was talking about a class. Also, not a great intro. Once again, awkward bits. You just introduce a character at the very end. What does he have to do? What's the connection? Is it just two separate stories? Are we a Song of Ice and Firing it? I don't know. Also known as I Reincarnated as an Immortal Caterpillar, which, good change on that name, because you just said she has 90 days to live. So, just basic stuff here. Prologue, the reason for it all. Okay, once again, we start off with a little poetry, but this is one that the writer wrote. It feels a little Hollow Knighty. A being that was not one, but innumerable in your lit RPG things, witnessed the fruit of its blasphemous pursuit. Same situation before where I just want to start summarizing the paragraph, but then the second sentence, we got to talk about the second sentence here. Defying the Eternals, it had lured a soul to a foreign reality. Pretty sure first off, had doesn't work there. Had is for the past perfect is for continuous actions that don't happen at a single point in time. Writers like to use it literary to say something that happened before something else, which could work if there's like a cutoff or something. I did a sloppy video on that. I should redo that. But had not appropriate here. It's not continuous. It doesn't happen before concurrent action. And that's all not what I wanted to talk about, in that to a foreign reality, reality is capitalized, which is strange. I found that strange and wanted to point it out. However, the unnamed horrors had annihilated creations for less. Okay, everything's capitalized. Literally. Almost. And that's a whole nother problem here, in that when everything's capitalized, that means everything is a specific thing that we're supposed to know or has import. So, okay, you know what? No more prologues today. We're skipping to the first chapter, because this is going to be a bad start. The Horror of Numerous Limbs. It's a reincarnation lit RPG. We can assume what happened. A peacefully slumbering creature was shocked awake, for peace was now denied to it. Okay, very basic start here. There is an insect that wakes up and tries to figure out what's going on. Presumptively the sorceress, which also, that's important. Let's talk what a prologue is. This is becoming more explanation and talking than story reading. But a prologue is like, it's a short story that's used to introduce your world. If you skip the prologue, you should fully understand what's happening in the first chapter without it. If you can't read the first chapter without reading the prologue, it's not a prologue. All right, so the first, this is long. So the first section of text is literally just the wake up section. Like, just keep it moving. Kind of boring. We understood from the third sentence everything you convey in the rest of that section. Section 2, monstrous existences beyond the gods. It remembered them now. Except there's a paragraph break. Is them the sorceress slash caterpillar? Nature itself. The five great ghosts. And okay, this is very much like the start of the prologue that started with this epic poem that read like Hollow Knight, where it's just lore conveyed obtusely through like narrative poetry or like mythos. Oh, it keeps going. Okay, it lost me. There's no narrative thread here. Someone wakes up, then you're doing something else. The prologue's a mess. Button. Next up, Erden, A Tale of Land Forgotten, with two little kids on the front, which I actually really like the art style. It looks fun. By Alcareel. That's half the fun, actually. Trying to pronounce our writers' names here. Magic, monsters, and mystery. Fate uses the unexpected meeting of two children to spark a wave of change upon the land. Comic adaptation on Tapas. Okay. Let's look at that real quick. Oh, well, the art style's not as endearing in comic form. But, I mean, it is a comic. I'll put some stuff up here because this is actually impressive. That is impressive. What to expect? Third person, 800 to 1,400 words a chapter, slow burn, which is worrisome right away because A, you're presenting it to someone like they have a slow attention span. Don't worry, it's third person, 800 words a chapter, slow. But they're like, slow burn. Like, I'm worried that you don't have the attention to read one chapter, but also, give me time. A rewrite of The Land of Erden. Weekly updates on Friday. The plot stays the same as the original work with just a few tweaks. I've decided to write in a way, okay, this is not an intro. This is just... He's used the intro space to... the comic was cool. Keep that. But everything else, just write a story intro that sells it. I don't need your life history. But no, it's uploaded 21 months ago, so I was worried this would be like a rewrite of what they originally submitted, because I don't like doing stories normally if they weren't submitted. Although I guess I have broken that rule once. But Chapter 1, Age 10, Yearning of Innocence, Part 1. Once again, very clunky. Very clunky. Yeah. Okay. A note from the author. If you see a dash, that means inner monologue is written like this. Just italics, man. I guess it's fine. I'm not mad at it, but just italics, universal. It's tomorrow. Tomorrow. Hee hee. Finally, it's tomorrow. I can nail that laugh. Hee hee. So we have a lordling, little lord boy, who's a commander, and he's just walking. Okay. Setup. Let's go. And based on the dialogue, very young. And there is a very classic fantasy setup here. We have a harvest festival. Very, very classic, although normally you have a farmhand or a farmer, more so than a lordling. Which, that's like classic Jordan. What was I say? Robert Jordan. I was about to say Jordan Peterson. The child asking about being chosen to use magic by the Undying. Not that Undying, but Undine. And I actually kind of like this next section here. After all the setup and explanation, which really wasn't that much, the little kid's going around and asking his family, why were my brothers? Why were you chosen to use magic? And his mom's like, well, the god chose all the handsome people. The father goes, we didn't cry when we were born. It gives a very sort of fairy tale-esque feel to it, which I appreciate. With his clear, icy blue, Yuri took in the full view of the preparations. I feel like we're missing a noun. And he's just going about the market. He's acting like a kid, which is strange to establish that he's the child of nobility, but he's just milling about with all the children's. From a world building perspective, I'd like some commentary on that, or some way to logically parse out what his role is in the town as a child who is more special than the others. Uri Lewith. He's running around the market. He finds this mana beast, this dark shape in a merchant's cage. Little moments like that, and going to talking with the mom. It's keeping me entertained. Now that I've actually made it through one chapter here in the first chapter, it's good to set up a clear conflict or clear needs, some reason to like root for your character and get behind them or have them really want something. There's a passing comment on "I want magic," but we don't really understand that. His inner drive could be "I want to eat a donut," and that would have all the same meaning for us. Like, okay, you want this thing, but why should we care? So your characters need to both want something, and we need to understand why that's important, or why there are stakes, or what will happen if we don't get it. You need to go beyond just saying character wants this thing. Okay, and obviously there's some things you can write that are going to be much more relatable. For example, if I see a lot of chase first chapters. If a character's being chased and someone's trying to murder him, we don't need extra explanation. We understand that our main character doesn't want to die. Got it. Instantly relatable. In this case, it's just a stupid kid walking around. Maybe he wants a donut. Maybe he wants magic. I'm not compelled. A good example of this would be the last book I finished, which I don't know if I've published that yet. Not the first chapter, but in the first act, one of the main characters' conflict is that he's part of this noble family in fantasy Japan, and he has to learn the family technique. That's his big driving force. Is I have to learn this magical technique. It's water bending from The Legend of Avatar. I'm really combining stuff today. First off, it's not hugely compelling. It's not the most compelling thing I've seen in the story, but it has all those elements there because his dad is a dick. His dad is a dick about it. So we, the reader, at least can recognize that, okay, you want this thing that I don't care about, but on the negative side, if you don't get it, I understand that it's your relationship with your father's bad, so you want to get this thing. Right here, we don't have that. Mother seems happy. Father seems happy. What's the downside to no magic? Who cares? Keep reading my story. Nothing matters. Also, when I do publish it, watch it, because this book's amazing. Chapter 2. Theron, a large city built beside a lake surrounding two prominent mountains. I'm going to say, stylistically, it's probably not a good idea to start your chapter off with the sentence fragments. Sentence fragments are a good, important part of writing, but they're used to like dictate flow. After a long sentence, you can have a 3-word, 4-word sentence fragment. If you've started off before you established a flow, it just reads like a sentence fragment. And then the second paragraph bothers me a little bit in that describing the pastoral, it's here's the cliffs, here's the farms, yada, yada, yada. Erected right in the middle of these cliffs was a mysterious structure reaching high up into the clouds. Past the mysterious structure and behind the and it keeps going. Like, that's not a description. You don't look at a building and say, oh, that's mysterious. Like, you can have a mysterious building, but then in the reader's head, why is that mysterious? Why? And let's just assume the next paragraph answers that. You still established it was mysterious and then started talking about something else. There needs to be a logical smoothness. And I'm really hoping that's going to be the case here. Let's see if my prediction... No, just completely drops it. So that's worse than I was expecting, because a lot of authors will like boomerang back. They like to boomerang, and I do it too. It's why I need an editor. I start talking about something, then you go, and then you explain what you talked about before, and that kills the flow of your book. Go from one thing and the next and the next. There needs to be a very clear logical progression. But that's not even what happened here. They just mentioned something vaguely and just said, you know what mysterious means. We know what mysterious buildings are. There's a shrieking shack right over there. Right there. That's mysterious. So thank you. Due to your incredibly vague description, I can now put whatever I want in your book, and in my head you're stealing from Harry Potter, because that's mysterious. Holy crap, that is thunder.
Oh, wait. Did I make a mistake? Okay, yeah.
So he asked his big brother in the fast chapter. We haven't even talked about his father yet. So in the second chapter, we now establish that he can't see his father until he learns magic, which is exactly what I'm talking about. I am re-engaged. Although I haven't read why that's the case yet. Let's see if it's a good explanation. Okay, I'm going to have to fill in some gaps here because it's not well explained. And even I think there are some logical issues because the brothers are also away, even though he talked to the older brother in the last chapter who can use magic. I'm not sure what's going on there. But essentially, his father is a commander somewhere doing war things or commander things, and so are his brothers. And so he has to use magic, then go to the academy. And after he does all of that, he can see his father one day when he joins him on the front lines. That's what appears to be happening. It'd be really great if that was established in the first chapter. It'd be really great if we actually understood that without me making a lot of assumptions. But at least you have that, sir. This is just the way my brain works. There's a structure to these things. And for whatever reason, I was thinking of the movie Dinosaur. I was thinking, you know what? The start of that movie is structured like a traditional fantasy harvest festival. Because as soon as the harvest festival, as soon as you get over that first initial arc of what the character wants and needs and why they're going to the festival, boom, disaster. And that's why I was thinking about it, I guess. That's pretty much all we get from the second chapter now. We established he's nervous. He's going to the harvest festival. But, like, what is the chapter? Like, let's look at this. Look at your character's problems as a solution or a process. I need to pass the harvest festival. The first chapter, he's asking people, how can I do this? And that would have been great if that was the chapter. He went to town and said, Mr. Merchant, from out of there, how do I pass the magic? And then in the second chapter, he can do something else to try and pass because he's really nervous, or maybe he's dealing with his nerves. Instead, it's just he's bundling up cloth. He's doing really inconsequential things. And it's not like he's having a conversation with other people while doing it and establishing other characters. Like, what's the purpose? It's a little unfocused. Do I want to go on? Let's read the first paragraph. How do I feel about the first paragraph? Uri, dear, we'll see you later, said Ravel bid Uri goodbye. Wave to our usual spot, all right? She got back on the carriage with the two maids and left for the tea house. Actually, yeah, let's keep going. Our character is now off on his own with the other kids at the ceremony. Potential. And now he gets to take place in the parade. And this is strange. This is what I was talking about in the first one, where he had only ever played with his brothers and the young maid Patty. But he also just randomly runs around town and looks at monsters in cages and gallivants about. So it's strange. This is what I was talking about, where you need to establish his relationship with the town and the world building better. But this is the opposite of that, where it doesn't mesh with what you've already established. Normally someone who doesn't play with anyone and is homeschooled would be like, you're not allowed to leave the family compound. You can't leave the castle. So this is strange. I guess you could do that if you establish, like, maybe in the first chapter that other kids were like staying away from him, and he tried to talk to somebody, but no one will talk to him because he's nobility. And that is kind of what's happening right now. He's locking eyes with a bob-cut girl and flashed one of his smiles, taking the girl by surprise. She hurriedly turned away from him and placed attention to the front of the parade. So he's trying to interact with, but might have been a flirting joke, not sure. But in any case, once again, stuff you could really have had in the first chapter. His mother and the maid are waving a banner in the stands, which, once again, this is strange for nobility. It's a very weird sort of world building, and I don't understand how him and his family quite fit into it. Like, mother, that thing is too embarrassing. You didn't have to bring that, he thinks, which is funny. I'm thinking, like, this is like a soccer game from the writer's childhood. Like, oh, you're embarrassing me. But you weren't nobility. How would the children of important politicians respond in that situation? How would their parents respond in the big soccer game scenario I'm presenting? It doesn't quite feel right. you would think that they're with guards and they're away from everyone else and they have to be forced distance, and like his mom's maybe trying to be happy and like sneaking a little peek and saying, thumbs up, you're gonna be good, but everyone else is just stoic. There's this constant theme of failure to treat the world building elements for what they are. He's nobility. Why is he nobility? Because I wanted him to be nobility. What does that mean? Doesn't mean a thing. Oh, and this is interesting. So Undying, which is a spirit, not a god, like I said, is actually watching over the proceedings, but only their presence. And if you're chosen, you could see the spirit. In Undying's stead, doll-sized minor spirits manifested and fluttered above the children. And then there's one of the child. It turns out they can use mana, and it's like someone says, "As expected from the spirit house." Are we in a small town? Is this like, is everyone here royalty? I don't understand. And then we end with a fantastic hook for the rest of this book, in that he speaks to Undying, and she says, "You can't use magic." That's great. If the first 2 chapters were well written, that moment I would have been totally engaged to read the rest of the book. There's huge stakes. Something's really bad's going to happen. And then that bad thing we were promised happens. He doesn't manage it. Great. You know what? I think that's a good place to put a pin on it because I've been reading this one for a while. It's out of the 3 so far. This is by far the best one. Admittedly, I didn't read the other 2 too much, but there's some promise here. I just think it just needs a little tightening. Just needs a little tightening. It's fairly good. Legend of the Spell Thief. Here's our next story. Legend of the Spell Thief by Malevolence Mao. Logan Hall, a simply family man and office worker, was abducted from Earth and thrust into the fantastical world of Avanar. Lost deep in the wilderness, he quickly finds that fantasy is fraught with danger, fangs, claws, and magic. A little generic, but it's a good opening. Gifted with the power of a unique class spell thief, which allows him to absorb spells cast against him and cast them back at his foes, he swiftly learns to fight back, trampling his way into safer civilizations. I'm going to say every person who might read your book knows what a spell thief is. I'm just going to throw this out. This was on the shelf at Barnes & Noble. It's a good line. In this context, maybe not. Shunned by adventurers who see spellcasters like him as a poor party members, Logan finds few allies, but his progress does not go unnoticed. As he gathers the personal strength to fend off wolves and goblins, he also attracts the attention of evil magi, eager to steal his powers. While he scrambles to find a way back home, will he even muster the will to do so, or will he be seduced by the power of magic? Fairly good descriptive once again. My issue becomes in 2 parts here. And this is a smaller issue because I think it's overall well written. In that adventurers see spellcasters like him as poor party members. Why? That makes no sense. We have no context for that. And even go on to say that, but like super evil people want to steal your power. So we establish that the powers are valuable and you tell us, but people are not going to like you anyway. What does that mean? I don't understand. And it's a little too over-explanatory. He gathers the personal strength to fend off wolves and goblins. Like, the 3rd paragraph here, you could really change around a little bit. It's confusing in parts and over-explanatory in parts. But I like the vibe it's going for. I understand the trajectory of your story, which is something. This is a stat-heavy fiction with plenty of status windows. My Chapter 0, whatever, it's not a prologue. Chapter 0. The night was old. A storm raging outside set a dreary backdrop for the workers in overtime or night shift. In overtime. It should be on overtime. Working overtime. The night was old. A storm raging outside setting a dreary backdrop for the workers. Why not just for those working overtime or on night shifts? I don't know. Maybe it's like a foreign thing. Do the English say in overtime? That made me think of a sports match. Although the next sentence, I'm going to read the next sentence because it's nice. A soundscape of pitter-patter rain combined with pencil scribbles and keyboard strokes. Not only descriptive, it also had a really nice cadence to it, like staccato. Pitter-patter, pencil scribbles, keyboard strokes. So we open up, we see our main character, Logan Hall, who is tired at his computer screen, which is... in the tier list of openings I've seen a lot of, it's top 3. This is the top 3 openings is someone's late at work. I've seen it so much. Okay, he has to work because there's a new client. Got it. It all just establishes that he's overworked, underpaid, underappreciated. And then we get some texts. This is interesting. There's some production value here. I'll see what we got here. This is interesting. This is really well written for what I was expecting. Although I can never see my dad using emojis. Not an old person thing, but maybe it is. Maybe it loops around when you're really old. And we get a nice detail here where after this conversation with his dad, he's fast asleep at this point. Last time he was up so late, he fell asleep at the wheel the next morning, worrying me sick with all the accidents he's been having. Logan thoughts wandered on about his dad. That's a really good personal detail. I'm sort of into this so far. And we established that, his mother's dead. He's got problems. Established, well, we already know where this is going. Obviously, it says abducted, but they always die in these stories. So be safe going home. The storm outside is terrible. The front person at the desk says. And I do want to say, already this chapter is longer than any of the chapters from the previous story, and yet I am far more engaged. Because every section, every couple of paragraphs, it's about something, and it's about something consequential. You can take a page to describe his family life and the problems he's been having with his dad and his worries, because you can relate to that. You can understand and empathize with this man. It builds him up as a character, as opposed to just, boy runs around town. He sees fantastical things. Isn't my fantasy world cool? No. And so our character is walking home, there's water splashing, yada yada. His eyes started to wander to his back, slowly turning his head around. Instead of the cold, he quickly felt a burning heat behind him. A blinding bolt of lightning was making its way straight to Logan. Lightning is fast, instinctively blinking to block the light. Lightning is fast. Logan didn't see when the bolt hit him, but he felt it because he was Spider-Man. Oh, but he felt it! Hot electricity coursing through his body. It really would have been funny if it turned out he was Spider-Man. Slowly moving from his back to his head and his limbs, yada yada. Okay, he got killed. He got struck by lightning. Got it. This paragraph, they're broken up by sections here. So this section where he's just walking home, it's a little boring because we doesn't establish any new information. We knew he was going home. We know he's tired. There's no escalation of that threat. There's no misdirection. I'm really tired. What if I just curled up into a ball with this homeless man? But what if the rain might kill me? We know he's going to die. We know something bad's going to happen based on the way your story is structured to turn our attention somewhere else. Maybe he's about to get mugged. Maybe he's really cold. Maybe he's worried about a car that's going to hit him, which there's a line about a car, but there's no threat established. So it's just a very boring 8 paragraphs up until it's just he gets hit by a lightning bolt, which would work if we're looking over here, then we get sucker punched by the lightning bolt. That would be engaging. But as it is, it just feels like you wasted all of our time. This entire 8 paragraphs, he literally could have stepped outside and got hit by a bolt of lightning. You add nothing with those 8 paragraphs. Silence replaced the torrential storm landscape. Pitter-patter became void. The blues, the blacks, and yellows of the night turned into a white space. Overwriting's a thing. You can describe too much. But in this instance, where it's punctuation, where he just died and now we're getting this grandiose reestablishment, that works because we are changing. So, I'm fine with it. And the author has good descriptive language. What is your name, dude? Malevolence Mao. Yeah, and then we get subject acquired, scan commencing, blah, 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 blah. Logan Hall, age 26. All the stuff. And then we get our stats. Strength 10, agility 10, constitution 10. So that's pretty much your very standard, Dungeons and Dragons or just tabletop RPG stat spread. I've never done any of those. I just know it from Knights of the Old Republic. And also, once again, this next section, much like the last, just seems overbloated. He's dying, then it's just abstract. Oh, he's going through all these things. There's a computer saying, set default to 10, additional points set to 6, yada, yada, yada. So it's a combination of another 12 paragraphs where we're being told what we get in the infographic, and we're just getting this very weighty prose, which at first it was punctuation. Then it comes back through. All the rings moved up to uniformly to the top of Logan, forming into a single ring at the tip of his head, hurtling through the abyss, passed through the clouds. It's just random lines from 3 paragraphs there, where it's cut back. It's a little too self-indulgent, because writing is a game. Writing is a game between you and the reader. What is your reader thinking as they're reading it? And what does your reader know? Our reader knows the stats, for example. Our reader has read your text and said, okay, stats. But then our reader scrolls down here once they're done with the paragraph, and then we get a stat board. We see the screen. So twice you've told us the stats, essentially. You could get rid of one of those. The infographic is really nice. So just get rid of all that text. I saw a screen. Here's the screen. Boom. You just saved 5 paragraphs by saying, here's the screen. And you have a nice visual. It's redundancy. Redundancy is the one major thing that kills engagement in writing. And we're talking about redundancy, even with that descriptive language, because we are at the end of the chapter here. Silence replaced. We start with the good one, the punctuation, like I said. Silence replaced the torrential storm soundscape. That's a good paragraph. Totally good with that. But then after we get some of the description, it's like a U shape. Description, stats, description. Like, why are we pulling back into description here? Focused on the stats now. It becomes redundancy. You the author, we gave you the chance. You had the time. You had your chance to describe things. You did it, and now you're returning to that thing you've already done because you weren't happy and you wanted it to do it a different way with different words and just paint more pictures. But the painting picture time is done, sir. And that kind of gets more into like the idea of like the pacing of the text too, because they are these big descriptions, but they are as he's being pulled into the other world. Well, before it was just because he was going to die, but those are basically the same thing. So redundancy, I'm sticking with it. And I think we have time for one more story because that was decent. In some ways, that was the best one. But in other ways, it was just a little much. So I haven't found a story I loved yet. But the first 2, no. The second 2 were okay to good. And let's see what we have for the final one. We covered that with Ben. Account deleted. Rise of the Last Star by Air12. I love the picture. It's a great picture. It's not necessarily a great book cover, but it's a great picture. As multiple worlds and dimensions converged, humanity was met with the unknown. A mysterious system forces it to play a part of the death game. Yeah. The story of a man's desperate attempts to save humanity from certain extinction. Okay, everything I've seen before. Let's move. People were born different. No. Every living creature was born different, even though they might look similar to others at first glance. Such was the world's cruelest law. I mean, maybe, but at the same time, I don't care. People were born different. Everyone gets that. Weak intro. But then the point of that, you're setting up to say, no, all living creatures were born different. Who cares? Who cares that one golden retriever doesn't look the same as the other golden retriever? I mean, maybe there's going to be a larger point and I'm going to regret this, but it seems like clunky and sort of like high school philosophy intro here. Liam opened his eyes. The old bed under him creaked in protest as he slowly sat up and drowsily examined his surroundings. Was there a prologue? No, this is just the show. Okay, yeah, he's just waking up. I'm sure if you've heard me talk before, you'll have heard this, or if you've heard really anyone in the writing industry talk before, you would have heard this. But opening up your story with sleeping is 9 times out of 10 the wrong choice because it doesn't add anything. You could start your story anyway, infinite possibilities. And you decided he just wakes up because that's a nice, easy way to start the day. Like, we can't start it at noon when he's having lunch because I guess the audience is going to worry and wonder what he did the last 4 hours. No. I think the one time I've seen it worked was, funny enough, someone who was reading my feedback thread and seen that I hated this, and they even preface like, I'm sorry I did it this way, but it worked for the story. I'm like, don't apologize. It was a romance story and she wakes up to a guy she doesn't know. I'm like, that works. It's an appropriate in the context. In this context, what do we get out of it? He wakes up, He takes a shower, he goes downstairs, he eats breakfast. We can assume he did these things. As a human being, I understand what I do when I wake up in the morning. Not only that, let's ignore it. Let's assume I'm an alien. What does him taking a shower and eating breakfast, what does that have to do with your story? At least we established when he's downstairs with Albert here that our main character is doing job interviews. So we understand his life is probably not in the best place. He has this need that he wants to fulfill. He's down on his luck. It's boilerplate, but it works. So good job there. And then things go crazy. In a flash, he sidestepped, almost crashing into other passerbys. Less than a second later, a flower pot crashed where he was standing a moment ago. Looking up, the young man saw a rather horrified middle-aged woman standing on a balcony over 10 meters above him, who breathed out in relief after seeing he wasn't injured. Okay, that was probably not as dramatic as it should have been there at the end. Oh, okay. I got my confusion here. So our character is much like the previous story. Our character is also Spider-Man in this story. When things were going crazy, and he describes when it was happening, I figured, okay, based on the description for the story, it's going to be this death game in another universe. I thought the world was going to like blow up or something. Literally, a flower pot from above was falling down. That's all that happened. And it was to establish that he has a sixth sense. So that's a weird thing that's popping up. Our characters are Spider-Man. I really misread it. It's confusing. It's not on me. He could feel it coming from above him. If he had to describe it, he'd say it was like a droplet of bright red paint on a pure white canvas, sliding in his direction. Both himself and others had called this several names throughout his life. I thought something weird and fantastical was happening. That's not on me. And then the chapter ends when he gets on the subway to go to the job interview. Well, you know what? I'm going to start with the compliment here. I like that we're spending more than one chapter in the real world to establish the character and his problems. That's something people don't do a lot. Yes, you want to have this fantasy plot. Yes, you want to get to all the cool stuff. But authors either rush or just skip the actual world, like the character building in the real world. Which at that point is like, why even have the real world be a part of your story? Like, the benefit of the real world is that we can relate to them and say, I am from the real world. I understand this character's issues. I understand why he would be out of sorts. And so if you just skip over that, it's like you can just have a fantasy character in the fantasy world. It doesn't need to be Portal Fantasy. Which is all to say, this chapter, nothing happens. He wakes up. We understand two things. We get two things out of this chapter. First off, needs a job, going to a job interview. Great. Boilerplate, like I said. That works. That works. It's not exciting, but it works for your character. Two, he's Spider-Man. Why did we need to understand these facts in the context of him waking up and going to the subway? Why is that the most dynamic and interesting way to tell your story? What if job interview? What if this chapter was about a job interview? What if he's in a job interview? So the secretary comes in and brings him drinks. Wow. I got your water. It's my superpower. You drop something and I got psychic powers, apparently. I'm Spider-Man. And then in a single chapter, you could develop that idea of him being down on his luck. And I'm assuming, let's just assume that the next chapters, it looks like 3 chapters maybe. Let's jump to chapter 3 here. Is going to be about the job interview. Okay, this took a turn here. So I guess the second chapter is job interview because the third chapter he's considering on just himself. So yes, the second chapter takes place after the job interview. Confusingly, it's not well established by any means here. And then it's just him thinking about how moping around and feeling how unfair the world is. Which is, first off, that's a problem because the interesting thing, the job interview and like, how was that unfair? Like, maybe he nails it. He gives a great job interview. And at the end, they're like, we love you. We'll put your name on a list, but I gotta lie with, like, the boss wants us to hire his son. We just can't do anything for you right now. Show us something unfair that, like, we're going one way and then, oh, surprise, the other way. Yeah, storytelling. It's just, thing happened. He's more sad now, which is the right, like, trajectory. And then by the end of it, he just decides, I might want to off myself. People like to say I skim things. I don't. I read very closely, and I often take notes. But, when I do as much as I do with these, especially on the forums, it's, like I'll edit 5 stories in a day. Like, come on. I'm not going to have a photographic memory of your story. But in this case, I will say I did skim chapters 2 and 3 there because I kind of gave up on the format there just to sort of give feedback on this the conception of the chapter. Because the first 3 chapters are bad interview, rolled as unfair, and let's double check and see how he dies here. Okay, and then so that's good enough. He doesn't go through with it. His spider senses tingle, and he says something's wrong. And then the alien threat that changes the world into a Hunger Games scenario happens, which I guess for him, his power really is a spidey sense because it's not just physical danger; it's literally anything. So your first chapter is your first section of chapters is job interview goes bad. He's really down on his luck, and then the world gets destroyed or turned into something else. Show us the actual thing you're talking about. Show us the job interview. Have that contrast with the end results. I mean, it's good to establish that he's down on his luck, and maybe he finally catches a break. Maybe after being told that the boss's son is getting the position, he's really mad. Then he's on the bridge. He's thinking about doing the thing from... He's doing that iconic scene from Les Mis. And then he gets a call from the interviewer who says, actually, we really liked you. Let's interview again in a month. We might have a position for you. So we have this like dynamic up and down of this character where his soul is crushed. He's moving to extremes. And then finally, for the first time in his life, he gets a break. And at that moment, it's all taken away from him because the earth is destroyed. Like dynamics, like elements in your story need to compare and contrast with each other. If the audience expects things to go really good, it makes it exciting if suddenly something goes bad. He's having a good interview, and then it goes bad. If he's having a bad interview, then something happens and it goes good. These create excitement in the reader because it's surprise, it's engaging the brain. If the things that happen that you're expecting to happen, that's not exciting. But this goes a step beyond that because nothing happens. We were told that something happened in between the 2 chapters. But from our 5 stories we covered today, the first one, I did not read enough to give an accurate rating. I just found the tonal shift extremely jarring. For our second story, it was just scatterbrained. Yeah, our second story was scatterbrained. A lot of weighty, nothing description, mythos. Like it's about a woman who gets turned into a cricket or a caterpillar. It's about a woman who gets turned into a bug. Go from point A to point B. Bug does this, bug does that, bug does that. Got it. Story 3. Decent. If I was going to rate story 3 out of a 5-star for a web novel, I would give story 3 like a 3. Like a 3. It was on the better side of acceptable. Or even like a 3.5. We'll say a 3.5 because that ending on chapter 3 was superb. I just think that some of the storytelling going into that was sloppy. Story 4, well written in parts, just a little self-indulgent. I would give that a 4 out of 5. And this story, the rise of the last star, like a 2.5. Let me know what you think about this format. I think the next episode is going to be number 10. It took me 2 years to make 10 of these. What did I get wrong? Why is my opinion wrong? That's really, at the end of the day, why is my opinion wrong? That's what the comment section exists for.